Harrison Ford, the first actor with the famous name, was a big silent star in the 19 teens and 20s and successfully transitioned to the talkies. But after just one feature-length talkie, he retired. Why? Join me as I investigate. Harrison Ford was born in Kansas City in 1884 to Walter and Anna Ford. I couldn't find much information about his early life. We know that by 1904 he was in New York. He made his Broadway debut that year in Ranson's Folly. He went on to have a prolific career on Broadway for the next decade, appearing in Strong Heart, Glorious Betsy, The Fight, The Switchboard, The Bubble, and Rolling Stones. In 1909, he married fellow Broadway star Beatrice Prentice. According to the Huntington Library, the couple kept their marriage a secret for a time as Beatrice's aristocratic family did not approve of the match. Not surprisingly, Harrison moved from Broadway to motion pictures, making his screen debut in 1915 in Excuse Me at Henry Savage Studios in a supporting role. In 1916, he had another supporting role in Anton the Terrible at Paramount, filmed at their Astoria Studios in New York. In 1917, Harrison moved from New York to Hollywood and starred in his very first picture there, The Mysterious Mrs. Musselwhite at Universal, which also starred Mary McLaren and Evelyn Selby. The film was directed by legendary trailblazing director Lois Weber, and Harrison got a critical rave in Moving Picture World, which stated, Harrison Ford gives a flawless performance of the part. He looks and acts the type of man demanded by the author with notable ease and convincing skill. While this film should have launched Harrison into immediate stardom, he spent the remainder of 1917 in supporting roles back at Paramount, this time at their Hollywood studios. At the end of that year, Paramount began to recognize what a talent they had on their hands and began to upgrade the size of Harrison's roles, casting him as the leading man to Vivian Martin and Molly in Tangled. This film launched Harrison into a new phase of his career as one of the most in-demand romantic leading men in Hollywood, romancing several of the biggest female stars of the silent era. He started with Constance Talmadge the most often, beginning with Goodnight Paul, and then A Pair of Silk Stockings, Sauce for the Goose, Miss Leffingwell's Boots, Who Cares?, Romance and Arabella, The Veiled Adventure, Happiness a la Mode, and Experimental Marriage. All of these made between 1918 and 1919 alone. Those same 2 years, Harrison also starred with Lila Lee in The Cruise of Make-Believes and Such a Little Pirate, with Marguerite Clark in Girls and Easy to Get, and with Ethel Clayton and Young Mrs. Winthrop. He also starred with Wallace Reed in 2 films, The Lottery Man and The Surviving Hawthorne of the USA, in which they played buddies in a series of misadventures in Monte Carlo. Harrison entered the 1920s, still one of Paramount's top romantic leading men, and continued to star opposite most of the studio's top female leading ladies for the most of the early part of the decade. Highlights of his work during the early 20s included starring with Norma Talmadge in Smilin' Through, which was the 5th highest grossing film of 1922, starring with Gloria Swanson in Her Gilded Cage that same year, as well as starring with Constance Talmadge in The Primitive Lover also that same year. The latter film allowed him to demonstrate his considerable flair for comedy. He starred in Maytime in 1923 with Clara Bow and Ethel Shannon, and in Little Old New York with Marion Davies that year, his first of several films with her. Little Old New York was a massive commercial and critical hit. Harrison went on to star with Marion again in Janice Meredith in 1924 and in Xander the Great in 1926, playing an exciting Western outlaw character. Also in 1926, it appears that Harrison began to branch out from Paramount. I can't tell if he was no longer under contract or not, since he still made a few more pictures there. However, he began working more often at PDC and Tiffany and found himself finally getting the star vehicles that he'd always deserved, even if the films were not quite as prestigious releases as his Paramount films had been. One of these star vehicles was 1926's The Nervous Wreck, in which Harrison played Henry Williams, a hilariously hypochondriac man that sets out on a quest to cure his ills. It won a Photoplay Award for Best Picture of the Month for November of 1926. In 1927, Harrison starred in the comedy No Control, and in 1928 he was top billed again in A Woman Against the World. In the late 20s, Harrison also starred in a series of pictures with Marie Prevost, including the hilarious A Blonde for a Night in 1928, in which a woman dons a blonde wig to test her husband's fidelity. Harrison's last feature-length film of the 20s was 1928's 3 Weekends, in which he starred with Clara Bow back at Paramount. Only a partial bit of this movie remains, as you can see here. He finished out the decade starring in 2 comedy shorts in 1929, Her Husband's Woman at Christie, which was actually a talkie but sadly was not well received according to Variety, and The Flattering Word at Warner Brothers, which also was a short talkie. Harrison then took 2 years off from the movies. I'm assuming he must have returned to the theater, probably acting and or directing in theaters in Los Angeles. In 1932, Harrison was lured out of retirement by the Poverty Row Mayfair Pictures to star in his first and only feature-length talkie, Love in High Gear, a fun comedy in which he played a jewel thief who comes across a newly eloped couple, leading to a series of zany situations. From what I can tell, the film sadly did not seem to make much of an impression, and Harrison retired again, this time for good. He returned to the theater full-time, working often at the Little Theater of the Verdugos in Glendale, California. In World War II, Harrison toured with the USO. He seems to have lived out the rest of the 1940s with his wife in quiet retirement. However, in 1951, tragedy struck. While out walking, Harrison was struck by a car and sadly never recovered from the injuries he sustained in the accident. He spent the next 6 years in the motion picture and television country house and passed away in 1957 at the age of 73. So we are left with the question, why did Harrison Ford retire after making just one feature-length talkie? Well, I think it's safe to say that by the end of the 20s, he was a little burnt out. I can deduce that he may have made the decision to leave Paramount in 1926 so he could break free from his romantic leading man image, and did so successfully, creating a new screen persona as a zany comedian. In his late 40s by this time, when the talkies were starting to arrive, I think he more or less recognized that his age could hinder him from getting the types of roles he wanted, so he retired before he moved into character actor territory. It's a shame, as I suspect he could have gone on to have a long career as a noted character actor. After all, he was around the same age as some of the 30s and 40s top character acting greats, including Charlie Ruggles, James Gleason, Edna Mae Oliver, Frank Morgan, Edward Arnold, Gene Lockhart, and more. But it's perfectly understandable, too, that Harrison longed to return to his first love, the theater, and he did just that. A number of Harrison's silents are available to watch on YouTube, including Hawthorne of the USA, Smilin' Through, Little Old New York, Xander the Great, The Primitive Lover, and The Nervous Wreck. You can also find his talkie Love in High Gear on YouTube, courtesy of the great Pizza Flicks. And just to set the record straight, this Harrison Ford is not related to the present-day actor with the same name. Silent star Harrison Ford left behind an incredible legacy of being not only one of the silent screen's greatest romantic leading men, but also one of its greatest comedians. What a talent, what a legend. I must thank the sources for this episode: Eve Golden's incredible book, Golden Images, Internet Broadway Database, IMDb, the Huntington Library in Los Angeles, and archive.org for their digitization of Moving Picture World and Variety. Please like and subscribe or follow this account if you want to learn more about the history of silent film stars whose stardom lasted only briefly in the talkies. Up next, join me as I investigate the silent talkie career of Helen Foster. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a great rest of your day.